see here. I think we have everything opened up. People are coming in. Hey, everyone. Welcome. Go ahead and get settled in. We're just a couple minutes away from start time here. Most of you know the drill. This is a Zoom webinar. The buttons are on the bottom of your page. Most of you, some of you move your toolbar. That's fine too. You have the chat option. We did enable that. I know I forget sometimes, but I did not this time. Everyone can chat with everyone, including our panelists. So go ahead and say hello in chat. I will be monitoring chat for any questions. You can use the Q&A feature too, but just chat it. We like the engagement there, and we like it when you guys are crosstalk bantering yourselves. Good stuff. So Michael, hailing from Washington, D.C., I learned. That's really cool, that area.
Yeah, this is a beautiful part of the country. It's the history here is I love U.S. history. Been all over the world, and this for me is the greatest country in the world. And the history of it gives us a platform to stand on that is unique in the world, in my opinion. And I love being in the D.C. area. The monuments are here, the history's here. We were talking right before we got into this. The Smithsonian's are here.
Ah, yes.
16 free museums. The National Botanical Garden is here. It's free.
Very
All
nice.
stuff, right? So it's a great place to be.
Yeah, we have some cool stuff like that here in Michigan. It's just not at the scale. We have a great botanical garden, actually, and we have a cool aviation museum with an SR-71 in it.
There
It's one
you
of their
go.
trainer ones. Such a cool plane to see.
Yes,
Oh, we could talk about airplanes all the time and what
yes,
future
we could.
technology that thing was at its
Oh,
time. Man,
it was
good
amazing.
stuff. Well, hey, we are talking about the future, and folks, it's 1 o'clock Eastern time, and my guest is on Eastern time too. That doesn't always happen. So good stuff. Thank you for joining us today. I've been really excited for this conversation. I first met Michael, our guest today, at the Institute Summit in, gosh, that was 2023, was the inaugural summit. And they gave you a presentation, which we rapidly realized needed more time. Not because you were taking too long, but because of the amazing information that you were bringing and how hungry everyone was for more of it. I suspect that's going to be the same thing today. So, Michael, thanks for joining us. And I'm hoping you could just tell our audience a little bit more about your background experiences and what brought you here.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm 43 years plus in industry. I grew up in the big consulting firms. So my last stop was at Deloitte as a practice leader in the Pacific Northwest. Got into the private equity world after that. So kind of know the funding guys that are coming to the table now in our industry. And then got into this business, I think 7, 8 years ago. I met a guy that asked me to take a look at his three shop system and bring my Deloitte background to it and give him feedback. And it sort of got me up to the edge of what we all do. And I fell in love with him, his business, this industry. And I've been in it for the last, 7 or 8 years, just hardcore. This is my full-time dedication at this point.
Nice.
Helping you all see things from outside an industry perspective. It's not that you're lacking anything, but what I bring to the table is I never owned a shop. I've never repaired a car in a rack. I'm never sold at the front desk, but I came from a place where we all believe the industry is going into a consolidated professional financing kind of a future. And we'll talk a little
Mhm.
bit about that today, but that's the world I came from. So I love bringing what I know.
Yeah.
I'll share it with you, take or leave whatever I say. You're welcome to disagree with me. I talk about trends, my opinions. You can say, oh, you're wrong. And I'll just smile at you and say, maybe I am. This is the
Mhm.
conversation that we're having, though, makes it worthwhile, right? So
That's
I
so
love the
cool.
privilege to do this, Craig. It's great to be here. Thank you.
Oh, it's really great to hear from you again and put you in front of this audience here too. These people that we get to talk to each month, awesome people. I know some of them very well now, and Autoflow clients and the Institute clients alike comprise a great deal of our attendees and registrants for this webinar, of course, and many others who are neither of those things. So happy to see you in this environment. The trends in the future are exactly the topic for today, and this is a perfect time of year for this conversation. Everyone starts to, all right, 2024 is relaxing a little bit. 2025 just around the corner after these holidays. What's the roadmap ahead look like? How do we navigate this stuff successfully? I love this. Now, we ask a poll question in every one of our webinars in our registration. And I love this about our audience. Right out of the gate, we asked what best describes your feelings regarding the future of your shop. overwhelmingly optimistic, and not a single answer was entirely pessimistic. Only a couple that had some slight pessimism, 3.6%, the lowest in there. And some of you thinking things will be about status quo, which isn't necessarily a bad thing for some of you. I know some of you are doing great. And then slight optimism to optimism rules the day. Nice to see, right, Michael?
Oh, I love seeing this, and I think this is a good place for people to park their mindset. You know, we had an election on the 5th, and I won't get political, but I will talk economics
Yeah.
and the effects of governments and systems. And I think there's a lot of optimism now that we might not have had things gone differently on November 5th, and we were moving down a different highway. We've got a 2 to 4 year window here for a business to go a certain direction, I think, which may be beneficial for a lot of the folks on this webinar.
Yeah.
So it's going to be a good season in front of us, and I think there's great reason for this optimism. I'm glad to see it. Glad to see
Oh,
it.
that's good to hear too. And that's these trends are exactly the sort of thing. So we're going to go ahead and get this thing kicked over, and we'll talk about some of your elements here that you want to bring to the table. So I'm going to go ahead and transition this screen share straight over to
Okay.
you.
All right.
And let me get that there and go ahead and share
I
yours.
will I will begin the share. Here we
All
go. So
right. Perfect. Now, in this trend you described, not being political, it's important, but the landscape and understanding it is, regardless of the feelings that we have, trying to navigate this stuff
well,
just
that's
depends on perspective.
yep. Yep. Well, our
Yeah.
industry in particular, you know, we've been involved in the environmental conversation, the global warming conversation, because the vehicles that come in for repair generate heat, you know, friction, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And the fossil fuels that are burned and all. And so we sort of got
Yep.
swept into a conversation. And can you see the
Yes.
screen, by the way, just to make
Yep.
sure?
Looks great.
Okay.
Yeah.
We got swept into a conversation that sort of put a lot on the table for us. That part of what I'm going to talk about today is that we really are involved in the automotive world, but there are people out there, their decisions will have a heavy hand on what happens to us. An example is the OEMs,
Yep.
the car makers. And from a standpoint of government dictating to the free market, to the producers that will sell to a limited market, and I'm going to say it wasn't going to be a free market, it was going to be a limitation from a government perspective on what would be offered to the marketplace.
Mm,
That puts a lot of pressure on the OEMs, and I'll talk
yes.
about that just a little bit. But
That all
you know,
trickles down to
they're
us.
well, they're trying to figure out what they're going to be when they grow up, and it's uncertain if they don't know what that's going to look like, right? So and
Yeah.
that's what I by December, Trump stood in, well, the president to be, again, you know, trying not to be political, but just to say, stood in Detroit before the election and said, I'm going to save the automotive industry. And so, you know, just recently here, since the election, there have been changes in General Motors investment commitments about what they're going to invest in, and you know, Mary Barra has to stand up when BlackRock shows up and says, "Hey, we're interested in the Davos agenda, and this environmental thing's important to us. What do you think?" As one of the largest investors, and what's she going to say? Oh, of course, GM will do whatever you need us to do, right? And off they go. You back off of that a little bit. The investment relationship hasn't changed, but the nature of the marketplace has. And if you open it back up to more of a free consumer market and less of a controlled one, then that bodes well for us as the independents that are standing behind the auto manufacturers. It's all interconnected, right, Craig? And that's the whole
Mm-hmm.
point. Is we can talk
Mm-hmm.
about the future of our industry, but we're not standing out there alone.
Mm-hmm.
We're not unaffected by the things that are around us, the parts companies and what they're struggling with, and what the private investors want to do in all of these industry verticals and what they're willing to pay for
Yes.
and the pressures that they're putting on it. And we're going to talk a little bit about a lot of that stuff, I hope, today before we're done. So,
Nice. Yeah, looks good. And you break this into these 7 categories here.
yeah. Well,
Okay.
these are trends that I
Trends.
talk
Yep.
about. And those of you that have seen this before, we're going to go through it at a high level. If you have had a privilege of seeing some version of this from me before, then your questions are a little further along. Craig, I'd love it if, and I'm not going to do much monitoring of the chat. So if you would be so kind as to say, hey, we have a question, because I'm going to kind of make sure that my sentences all glue together. And I can only do one thing at a time. Ask my wife,
Oh,
right? So
we'll give you a nudge. I always need a nudge, otherwise I get on a roll. And yeah,
oh,
so
that's
this is
me.
good.
That's me too. So I'm going to start. I'm going to start on these talking about automotive technology because that's really the big question that the OEMs are
Sure.
struggling with at this point. Then I'm going to go up to the left, right above it, the aftermarket consolidation. It's what we're going to go through in
I
our
see a lot of
industry,
that.
whether we like it or not, and why that is, and what the dynamics are.
Yeah,
Then
it
I'm going to
paused
talk
for a
about
little while, then it picked right back up again.
well, it paused with the uncertainty of the political situation and the economy
Mm,
follow from it, in my opinion. And so the investors didn't go away. Our industry didn't change significantly in there. It just became a, well, why don't we just wait and see what happens in November? Heard that 1,000 times in the
mm.
year and a half headed up into the election. And now that it's sort of settled, conceptually it's settled, right? We have to get through January 20th to actually have it be settling. But and there's a little window there, right? There's still 5 weeks until that actual transition occurs. But there's
Right.
great optimism. The stock market's bounced. The economy is very optimistic at the change that's coming overall, which bodes well for people having jobs and people wanting transportation upgrades
Yes.
and those kind of things. So, well, I'll talk about the outside investors, and I'm going to jump over to competitive advantage briefly because we're going to need to think differently than we have in the future than we have traditionally gotten away with. And I will put it that way. We've been a little
Yeah.
about our concepts of competitive advantage, and we're going to have to up the game some. Human centricity and mastery is a sort of a human focus on uber high performance, and then how all of that last comments will be about breakthrough strategy. All the stuff on this page has to be weighed in thinking about what do you want you and your company to be 2, 5, 7, 10 years from now. If you're an older guy like me and your solution is I'm going to get out of this thing and not have to deal with it, you are going to sell it to somebody who is going to have to deal with it. So I wouldn't
Yeah.
recommend you wipe your hands of it and just disappear unless you're going tomorrow. If you're going to stick around for a while, you should at least understand the dynamics that are coming for the folks that are going to be left here, potentially even that you're selling it to. So,
Yeah. And it's gotten
anywho,
really hard even to predict 3 years out in
yeah,
this
yeah, yeah.
landscape.
And part of it is thinking big, going long, and then backing up to the practical tactics, and then staying darn flexible, incredibly resilient in the middle. Right, that you got to be able to dance quickly and move quickly when the ground under our feet changes. And that's again back to the November kind of conversations. So it'll be
Very
interesting.
nice.
It'll be really hard to see what it looks like in 20, 25 years. We see dimly through a fuzzy glass, right? So
Yes. Yep.
anywho,
Very nice.
yeah. So is this? Should we dive into
Yeah.
the
Let's dive in.
technology stuff? All right. So let me get into the automotive technology questions. And really, I'm telling you all things that you know, but I'm going to set perspective with this to get a sense of what the OEMs have been struggling with. And this is the sort of the big consulting firms where I came from, the Deloittes, the McKinseys. We're the ones that sit with the OEMs and try to help them make sense of the world. So my sourcing is to go back to those guys and say, okay, what are your latest conversations with these determinants of the automotive industry? And this is what they say they're discussing. Connectivity, of course, is this fact that the vehicles can talk directly to the manufacturers using the internet on an
Mhm.
ongoing basis, and the communication that can occur. And the Right to Repair Act is always a conversation we're having out there
Hmm.
in our world, making sure that we keep our channels open and that they don't get pinched down technologically. Alternative drivetrains, of course, EVs with a drive of the prior or the current and soon to be prior government system on a global basis. There was a lot of conversation about a drive in that direction. China's fast producing lots of materials and parts and actually cars in addition to that. So this is a
Very
global issue.
affordably. Yeah.
Yeah, well, and it's a global issue of what does it look like on a global transportation model. The shared mobility issue comes up. Of course, we know the Ubers and the lifts, but the younger
Mhm.
generations, there are huge ramifications of this. The younger generations, I couldn't wait till I was 16 to go get my learner's permit. So
Yep.
the kids of today are like, I don't think I need a driver's license. It's like that wasn't my life, right? There was
Thank God my kids are all super enthusiastic. Yes.
they're in the
Because we
right.
get
They got
tired of running them
that's
around.
right. That's exactly right. But they're like, I'll just call an Uber if I have to go somewhere. It's like, well, I understand that mentality. So that whole
Mm,
concept, again, if the OEMs end up owning the technology of the Ubers and the Lyfts, or if it ends up in the hands of the Amazons and the Googles, then we have different outcomes for the OEMs, right? These are big
absolutely.
deals for those guys. And obviously the autonomous driving questions too. GM just mentioned they're backing off of some of their autonomous technology development, and the
Very
OEMs
recent
are up
development
against
on that. Yeah.
Absolutely. And the OEMs are up against it because they've got technology firms that are devoting 100% of their core competency attention to that. And that's
Right.
not a core competency focus of the OEM. So these are the
Yeah.
big buckets. And the question
Yeah.
is with regard to CASA, is it going to move fast? Is it going to move slow? And then the second question the OEMs have to answer is, are we going to be able to control all the touch points? Or are we going to lose control of the touch points? And those two questions matrix out to look like this. And this is kind of just an introduction to what they've been struggling with. And that is that the vertical axis, the degree of emergence, it goes fast at the top, the trends are disruptive, or it goes slow, the trends are
Mhm.
stagnant. The
Mhm.
x-axis across the middle, left to right, is that they lose control of the touch points at the OEM level, and a lot of other people are involved in the provision of lots of sub-services, if you will, or do they
Sure.
maintain the control touch points at the OEM level? And what that
Mhm.
means is they have to be the owners and masters of the autonomous vehicle technology, and they
Mhm.
have to have the Uber technology that's owned by the OEMs. I mean, that's what that right side of that matrix looks like. So here's why they
Mhm.
care. There's a huge difference for them in the financial outcomes. The
Mhm.
red circle, I hope that popped up. It's very light on my
Yep.
screen, but I hope you can see it.
We
That's the
do.
one they want. They want it to move fast because there won't be a lot of time for people to come up with competitive alternatives to that. And they want to hold on to the touch points. And the reason that they do is the financial version of this. This is their preference. The profit bars are on the very left side in a light sort of a turquoise blue. If
Still
the
have the red circle
OEMs,
on your screen. Yeah.
what's that? Yeah,
The
inside the
red
red circle on the
inside the
top
red.
right. Yep. And you
Yep.
see the $34 billion profit for the OEMs if it goes fast and they can control it all. If it goes slow and they can control it all, it goes from 34 billion to 22 billion. And if it switches over the line to the other side where they've lost all or most of the touch points,
Ah.
their profits are down to 5 or 6 billion. So you talk about the investors behind the OEMs, you talk about the OEM executives, right? They want that top right
They
quadrant.
want the top right. Makes
They do, of
perfect
course
sense.
they do. And
Yeah.
part of what's happened to them is with the shifting sands of, government intervention in an otherwise free market in the United States and China doing what they do with their government supported manufacturing, where the actual cost of a car is partially funded by the government and we're in a free market here. All of these things globally weigh into the pressure that's on the American automotive manufacturers, the folks, and the Europeans too, right? The Japanese, et cetera. I
Mhm.
guess globally, but the pressure's on them, and the whole point is they don't know what to plan for, and so you start planning for everything, but that's not very effective.
No.
And so part of what happened in November was we have a dedication back to a free market model. You and I were talking before. Trump stood in Detroit and said, "I'm going to save the automotive industry. You can count on your jobs." He's talking about tariffs around outside of all of our borders for folks that bring in things that have been supported by governments and what we might consider to be unfair competition from a straight up standpoint. So I think
Mhm.
it looks better for the OEMs, Craig, is the point of this. And so there's less pressure on them to be a little bit more free to do what makes sense to them. But I'll give you an example. Amazon just announced a deal with I think it was Hyundai that they're going to use 48 U.S. cities as a testing point to have an online dealership model rather than having the old dealership distribution model. So again, there's a downside to this for the OEMs that as the pressure of time comes off, they may think they have more time to back away from all of the CASA related issues and more. And in that time, it gives more space for the other companies that might have an alternative technology, an alternative vendor, provider approach, whatever. It gives them more time to wiggle into the space and possibly pull it off to the left-hand side of this chart from the right-hand side. So it's a crazy time in the
Mhm.
transportation business, and we're in it. I mean, we are. This all affects us. So that's why I put this in here just to have us paying attention to it and realizing that as the OEMs go, we go. We will have to follow them, and it's good to keep an eye on the trends. So,
Interesting.
yep. With the dealership model I mentioned has always been discussed, or it has been in the last 5 to 7 years, whether this is going to survive the future. This is a McKinsey chart that talks about by 2030 where the trends are with regard to various dealership aspects. Only one aspect of it is greater, if you will, in a quote sense, and that is the cost of the digital back office and the size of it. The rest of the dealership model is fading. And what I'm going to talk about when I get to the consolidation part of our time together is there are private equity firms, guys, that are eating up dealerships. So I, was in Denver before I moved to DC, and we had the John Elway, car dealerships. Those types of things aren't owned by the nameplates anymore. They're owned by private equity firms, and I'll get to some of the statistics, but they're going crazy buying up dealerships, and the point of that is they want to have a dominant control over whatever distribution model is when all the dust settles on this stuff. Same kind
Yeah.
of things that are pressuring our industry. So
Yeah, we've seen that in my hometown. There's dealership groups now, but literally they have the same name for whatever make, model, whatever make it is. Doesn't matter if it's foreign or domestic. Same group owns it. You buy a car, you're buying from that group.
absolutely, absolutely. And Lithia and Penske are the two biggest consolidators at this point, but the private
Mm.
equity guys are there in that industry, like they're here at the edge of our industry. And so this consolidation game is on in the dealership world. And the question is, because the kids of today don't want to sit in a dealership and wait for the finance department to tell them what their payment is. They just won't do it. So
Mm.
the model has to change in some regards, and nobody really knows until what,
Well,
right?
Tesla's bucked that trend rather
Absolutely.
clearly. Michigan,
Yep.
they weren't even allowed to sell cars for a while because they didn't take the dealer model, which is a regulated thing, which is really complicated. We'd have to go, if we wanted to buy a Tesla, you'd go down to the Chicago store and then you drive it home. So lost
Absolutely
all
right.
that.
And
Yeah.
and the service is mobile, right? In most cases with
It
Tesla,
is.
rather than having it be centered on a physical location. So yeah, the
Exactly.
dynamics under all of our feet are changing. So
Wow. Yep.
the margin shift between the parts companies and the manufacturers has, sort of settled. It used to be that the OEMs made higher profits making cars than the parts companies did. That switched for a while. And this is causing issues in the relationships between the parts manufacturers and the car manufacturers. Just to let you know, Stellantis, as an example, has sued their fifth uh, their fifth parts largest. Okay, it's the fifth parts supplier that they've sued so far, and one of the largest ones they work with globally, because the parts companies are not backing down on their prices to help the OEMs figure this out. So the OEMs are suing them on the prior contract and saying you're gouging profits from us, and the parts companies are saying nope, we're right where you said you wanted to be, and that's your problem if your margins have dropped. So there are
Mm.
lawsuits that are flying around out there, and so even making cars. This is another aspect, right? That both the parts manufacturers and the distributors, and we're going to get to Napas and the World Packs here in a minute, all this stuff's in play, and they're arguing between themselves about my margin went down. You should reduce yours. Why should I reduce yours? Because yours went down. Those are arguments that are happening right
I
now.
feel like the same thing happens in auto repair shops to their suppliers as well.
Listen, if I don't think I still have it in here, but if I showed you the charts about how complicated the parts manufacturing and distribution industry
Uh-huh.
is, realize that we are there too, just a tail. We're a tail on a very big dog in our buying our
Mm.
parts for our independent shop. So what
Mm.
happens in their world is going to affect us just like it's like the OEMs, right? I love
Yeah.
all this stuff. I don't like the uncertainty of it, but I
Yeah.
love the trending of it.
You can
So
see where that trend, the orange and the red bar
yeah,
flipped. Yep, very clear.
it's very
Interesting.
interesting stuff. Yep.
Yeah, yeah. What was
Uh,
that catalyst in 2020?
Yeah, gee, I can't think of what that was. Right?
Interesting.
Yeah, yeah, and what's gonna with yeah. I have so many things I could say that I shouldn't from a political. We're gonna find out a lot about 2020 in
Well,
the
we'll
next
we'll have to make sure
12
people
months, I
get over to
think.
the summit this year in Florida and talk to you there, and we'll hear those things,
There
right?
you go. Then I'll tell you. Then I'll tell you everything I think, and you can, you can really get mad at me. So key predictions here with regard to the automotive trends for the OEMs are that they're being challenged and they're going to make significant changes whether we like it or not. So we just have to pay attention. Our role, right, and everything around us is going to change. So we have to be flexible too. Our industry structure is going to evolve. The dealerships may be going away. Certainly the big Sears, Walmart, auto repair type stores have faded and gone away.
No one
They're
misses them.
still changing tires at Costco, whatever. But yeah, and so it's going to be us and the big box stores, I think, left at
Yep.
the end of the day. If the dealerships go, their service departments are going to go. So
Mm.
that's those that's in play. It's just in play, hasn't gone away yet. And we're going to need breakthrough strategies, which is my seventh thing to talk about if we get that far through this with our time today. You may have to have me
Yeah.
come back and do a
Might need a
second.
part two. I'm already feeling
I'm
it.
already, yeah, we get excited and we keep going, right? So,
Yep.
so the leading independents, the folks I assume are on this call and those that will hear it following or on this Zoom, we got to stay sharp and we got to be ready. And change is upon us, and we're going to have to, whether we like it or not, this stuff's going to happen. And we can say, I don't want to be a consolidator and I don't want to be consolidated and I like it the way it is. And I just say, Jet, that's a great sentiment, but the market's going to change around us and our industry is going to change. So at the very least, we need to be knowledgeable about it and build strategies for ourselves individually around it so that we know what we're doing and we don't get sideswiped or run over, even worse, right, by somebody we didn't see coming. So
well, you break it down into a granular piece, just EVs versus internal
yeah,
combustion engine is its own thing. And that's such a difficult thing. It's become its own political issue and evokes
absolutely.
powerful emotions out of people when you start
Great
discussing
emotions,
it.
huge
Yes.
emotion. And there are other technologies that are continuously being developed, battery technologies that might sit on top of your cars. So all of the,
Yeah.
the diesel driven generator, Tesla charging station, funny arguments where we all laugh and point fingers. There's all kinds of people. And again, the OEMs aren't working on all this stuff, Craig. If somebody gets that battery technology figured out and can stick it to the top of every electric car on the planet, then the whole argument, we don't have a grid to support it, just disappears overnight. And I
Overnight.
guarantee you there are companies working on this all over the planet
Absolutely.
trying to figure out how to get
Yeah.
that problem solved.
No, I
So
love
it's
how you
all at
tackle this
once.
too. You've already, I feel like you removed emotion from this, and it's just you're dealing with things
Yeah.
that you will likely have to deal with, like it or not.
Like it
Be
or not.
ready.
You're
Yeah.
100% right. And this next one is the really very tender one for a lot of us owners, especially the longer term, longer service ones in the industry, is the consolidation that's begun and it's accelerating and it's not going to stop until it's over. Unless something
Mm.
catastrophic
Mm.
from a global war happens or something, it's not going to stop. And so let me dig into that real
Yeah.
quickly. There are 6 million privately held businesses on the federal government books, and 2/3 of them are assumed to be baby boomer owned. These are federal government statistics. So that's 10 trillion, all industries here, 10 trillion in US wealth. It's in baby boomer hands. Baby boomers are age 60 to 78 this year. We asked them
Mm.
8 years ago at the Equity Planning Institute level, hey, when do you guys want to be out of the business and transition? By now, almost all of them wanted to be gone. But
Mm.
here comes COVID. The federal government showed up with money. Hey, put this in your bank account. Let's see what happens. Well, maybe I'll delay my retirement a little earlier. 2008 and 9 made them delay it the first time around because their portfolios tanked. So there's a lot of guys kind of rolling through this industry, aging out, and at some point they're going to go. And we know that. So here is the scary statistic that goes with this. The private equity world estimates that of all of these privately held businesses, that 80 to 85% of them will not sell in a proper financial transaction to a professional investor type. Can you sell it to your key employee? Yeah. But the point is that most of the owners of these privately held businesses did not invest in value components in their businesses. They used them like a cash machine. And what they have now is some fairly low level assets and a not well developed company from an investor perspective. And a professional investor will look at it and say, nah, I'll pass. I'll wait for you to lock the front door and then I'll go make a new deal with your landlord and start from scratch and get a better deal
Yeah.
and have to pay you
Oh
out.
man, Michael, you just described why me and my brother didn't go into the family business ownership.
Brother,
And
I'm
yeah.
80 to 85%. So if you take these numbers, right, that's at the 80% level, it's 3.2 million businesses or 8 trillion in wealth that potentially aren't worth transacting. They
Unbelievable.
sell cheap or they just lock the front door. In our industry, if
Wow.
there are the 235,000 companies we think are here, that's about 160,000 boomer owned. in our industry. A lot of us think there's more boomers in our industry ratio wise, but just stay with the bigger statistics. That's an 80% failure rate applied to that. 55% of our industry, or 130,000 competitors, will probably close in the next 3 to 5 years when their owners decide to leave, right? Either sell super cheap or just walk away. Now, that disruption means that everything they do is up for grabs. So you want to talk about opportunity in the middle of this, right? There's pressure on the system, and the people who aren't ready. I don't want to see anybody have this scenario, but they're going to get left behind and squished. I mean, they're just going to get run over. They're not going to be able to exit gracefully. They may not have what they need to retire, and they may end up working as a store manager, a service advisor in somebody else's shop at some point before they're
Yeah,
done.
I mean, there's a silver lining in a way, isn't there, Michael? Because we have staff shortages in a lot of shops.
Well, it's a terrible solution, and
Sure is.
it's a funny
Wrong
thing to
solution for
say, but
that
in
problem.
reality, it's a terrible solution for a 70-year-old ex-owner to be back behind a front desk because they need to pay their house payment this month. And
Can't
I,
imagine them being manageable staff members either.
well, this is the way we want it done, but let me tell you a better way, right? It's going
This is what I
be a
used to
whole lot of
do.
conversations at the front desk and the back shop, that's for sure. So, no, and it's not, and again, we're enjoying the time together, but this is a heavy duty
It
subject because
is.
this is
It's alarming.
people put 30, 35 years, maybe 40 into a business. And this is not an easy business. They work hard, they get to the end of it, and then they realize that they didn't do it in a way that they have the legacy financially, even for their family, that they would want to taken out. And so again,
That's
part
sad.
of why this is not a sales pitch for me. Part of why I'm here is I don't want this stuff to happen to us. With 50 other industry verticals have been through this. It doesn't have to happen this way. We can plan our way through this and out the backside in a way that people are better off. So I'm
Beautiful.
thankful to be able to share this stuff with you guys. Owner
Yeah.
exits, we talked about them wanting out. 80% of owners have 90+% of their net worth wrapped up in their business. And here's some stats. 67% or 2/3 of owners don't know all their exit options. And I'm telling you that with the private equity guys here, there's a longer list than our industry has seen before. You can track all the way down here. 50% in the middle have done no planning whatsoever yet. They haven't even thought about it. And the real stat that hits me in the chin is the 75% of business owners that profoundly regret exiting within a year of exiting because they did it so poorly. They weren't set up properly, and in the end, they go, "Wow, I blew that." It's like, yeah, you blew it on your 40-year investment. You don't get that back. You don't get a do-over on this. And again,
Mm-hmm.
that's what we don't want. If
Mm-hmm.
you think family transactions you mentioned are a turnkey solution, they do work if you get the family ready. But when you don't, that's what these statistics suggest, that there's only a 30% success rate through the end of the second generation. It goes down to 12% in the third and 3% in the fourth and following. Guys, that's a 97% failure rate by the time it gets to your great grandkids if you don't get them ready. So just flipping it to family does not solve this problem without
No.
preparation,
And it makes
right?
a lot of sense in an industry like ours too. When I think, because I would have been essentially a fourth generation
Yeah.
in our family business, third generation in most regards, but great grandpa fixed cars. My son's going to school. He'll be a fifth generation technician in our family. It's quite a legacy. But the changes that the industry would see inside of five or even just four or just three generations,
Yeah.
it's no surprise that a business model would have to change in that time period, and they often do not.
They often do. They don't, and that's the kind of what you and I were talking about. It's like, look, if you think you're going to walk away from this and you don't have to pay any attention to this, you better go fast and you better get out clean. Because if you
Mm.
think you're going to owner finance your key employee, you may end up with your shop back in 5 years and you will be no longer retired and you won't have the healthy shop sold to them. You're going to have a mess that gets put back in your hands because you still own the majority of it. They potentially disappear and now you're back in the industry again. Instead of, you sold at 62, now you're 67 with a broken company back in your hand, and that's your financial legacy. So
That is a
I'm
nightmare
not,
scenario.
I'm not trying to scare anybody, but I'm just throwing it out there to say, don't let this
Hmm.
happen to you, right? Let's plan yourselves around it and let's understand it. So
Hmm.
this is how it sort of stats out, right? And the concept is if that 55% suffers and or dies, That's the bottom half of the industry, if you will, from the success perspective. Look at it this way. Today, all of these players are here. Take all the colors off the board. The average shop is at the high point. That's where the zero standard deviation is, right? In the new future, should that all play out as feared it may, based on the stats, the average company today won't even exist. What it means is business as usual ain't going to go. If you're average today, you'll be the bottom of the new bell curve, right? So all that means is game's on. We got to have better strategies. We got to have better thinking. We got to have better approaches to this if we're going to get through this. And I'm not pretending there'll be 235,000 companies. There will, as we go down this road, maybe be a few hundred at the end, kind of like hospital systems at this point that are owned by huge investors. The collision business has gone significantly down that road. The Walgreens just sold to another private equity investor. You name it, mom and pop drugstores, grocery stores, liquor store, all this. A lot of this stuff is in the hands of big investment groups. So it's here, right? So here's it's just kind of a wake up stat, right? Business as usual wake up stat. This is a picture. I was actually a couple of years old. I meant to date it, and I just haven't had time. The brands are consolidating. We talk about consolidation. The OEM, that takes Stellantis 5/8 of the way down, picking up all kinds of brands all over the planet. They're all trying to gain scale so that they have investability for whatever the unknown future looks like. So this is messy and getting messier.
Oh, it's messier within this. Recently experienced, because we were shopping around on different vehicles and looking at different deals on EVs and everything else. And so looking at EVs, Subaru and Toyota partnered and built the Solterra BZ4X. And then Honda and General Motors are using the same platform. So these little partnerships on certain projects are already following new lines that I wouldn't have ever imagined.
And I'll throw this out there. Apple has been in discussion for quite a while to build an electric car from scratch. They're not even wanting to talk to an OEM because their confidence is not in the OEM transferred platform or modified platform. It's in starting from scratch, very Apple-esque, right? But it's that kind of conversation also going on where there are new entrants entering into this world, and these guys don't like that. They're threatening. Lots of Chinese brands hitting the ground at this point. My wife is
attractive price points if it wasn't from China.
I'm looking at a really pretty car on an advertisement down in Sao Paulo, and it's a car I've never heard of before. And I look it up, and it's a high-end Chinese electric car being sold into the Brazilian market. We haven't even heard of. We don't even have it here.
Nope.
So the global system here, as we talked about, is shifting. The dealers, we mentioned, they're consolidating. The profits for the dealers in the last few years have been significantly up because of what's been happening, 300-400% increases over the years. So it's good money to be in a dealership business, but the future is unknown. So the top 10 dealership groups now own up to 10% of the roughly 17,000 dealerships in the US. That's an all-time historic high. The two big players I mentioned, Lithia and Penske, now have over 300 rooftops each, and this game is on, and it's happening fast over there in that world. The large public dealership groups are intent on expanding. They're looking for regional bases, very similar to what's happening in our industry. Small to mid-sized groups with multiple rooftops become attractive to them, and we're headed for a smaller number of players that own all of those things so that they have scale. So it's the same thing happening with us, but it's happening in the dealership world. A couple of notes on the parts end of the world, right? Advance sold Worldpac to Carlisle for $1.5 billion. I think it closed a couple, 3 weeks ago in official sense. It's done now. It was anticipated by year end. The part of Advance's concept was they were going to return to their core blended box business, meaning they were going to get out of the wholesale parts world and get into the retail. And then shortly after this, I haven't updated this slide. Another bullet for Advance would be they've just announced a closing of 700 plus retail stores, some of them company stores, some of them franchise type stores, as a shrinkage. So this sings to, I'm an outside guy, right? Looking in from a financial investment perspective. This sounds a lot like them shrinking down for private equity transfer of ownership, right? Same thing happening here. I'm not telling you anything that I know that you don't, but I'm watching from the outside. GPC is buying back Napa stores, the jobbers all across the US, the bigger ones, meaning that they're taking the franchise looking stores and making them company stores. In addition to that, I know lots of Napa execs, and when a senior person leaves, they're not replacing them. They're just shifting the work around, which also sings to lightening up potentially the cost of the executive teams around the country, which are all sort of preliminary things to private equity transfer or sale, should you wish to do that. I don't have any of their strategy documents. I have no inside knowledge, but the parts companies are under the same pressure we're talking about, and they're looking for what their next world's going to look like. And the PE guys are standing right next to them too. It's all
Interesting.
automotive and aftermarket, right?
Wow.
This is our world. I built the Straightaway project with 5 of my best friends, my dear guys. It was a 43 shop private equity placement that closed in March of 23. All these big names on here are the initial consolidators who are on the ground, like early on in the collision business. Sun's the big 800-pound gorilla on the table at this point, but you've probably heard of a lot of these names. Where it depends on where you are.
Greatwater is named after a pretty great area around here in Michigan. I know those guys.
Something to be proud of. Not exactly, right? But these are the phase 2, and I think I left the phase 2 slide in here. This is phase 2, where our single shop guys would buy a second, then a third, maybe a fourth and a fifth. Maybe they get to 10, whatever. These guys have taken it up a notch, with the exception of Straightaway, which is an owner-operator driven project that got financial funding. To my knowledge, all the rest of these are private equity driven, which means the PE guys walked into a decent sized player and said, I want to buy you as a platform foundation. And they said, okay, what will you pay me for that? What that inherently says to our industry is that the majority of guys on this page are driving a private equity project and telling you how it's going to go. One of the things we did at Straightaway was said, this is how we want to run the project. And if you don't want to fund it, we'll find somebody who will. And our guys, at least for now, are running shops the way we would run them, not the way a private equity firm would have them run.
And that lasts for a little while, but it's explosive growth.
It'll last for a while. And the whole point is the game's afoot here. And if you want to make a deal in private equity, make the deal you want. Don't take the deal you get, if that makes sense. There's more money out there, guys, than there are projects for them to invest in. And if you go to them with an investment worthy project, especially in an untapped industry like ours, they'll show up with a checkbook and they'll be grateful to get here. And I tell our guys, Craig, we talked about how good the business people are at the top of our industry. They don't believe me when I say it, but they're as good as they get. When we show an investment worthy project to the private equity people, they're dying, they're salivating to want to do business with us. And what that means is we're in charge, guys. When you do that kind of a project and you take it to PE, you declare the terms. They don't. Does that make sense? We're leading in the conversation. They're negotiating with us, not the other way around. So they're great.
Yet that's not how people have been. Obviously, one of your points.
That's not how we think. That's right.
Nope. We just kind of, what's it worth to you? Kind of an attitude.
And that's right. It's like, wow, they'd pay me that much for it. That's more than my buddy down the street got. It's like, yeah, but that's far below what you could have gotten for it if you'd have done it
Fascinating.
Right. So, yep.
This is actually increasing my optimism while making me pessimistic about some things. It's amazing.
Yeah, no, I know. That's why the optimism is appropriate, right? And I'll say this: it's the old Chinese proverb. There's risk, and there's also opportunity, and the opportunities in what's forming are off the charts, guys. It's like never before. Is it scary? Yeah. Is it manageable risk that can be? And it's in economic terms. I'll say this word: exploited. Economic word is exploited. You exploit a market. It's a collapsing market. We go in there and properly handle it. It's called in economics exploiting a market. But the point is we can reform the market in a way that's good for everybody. We can exploit it in a win-win way. And that's
I have a question here too, Michael. I have a question from Bill. He asked, what does an investment-worthy project entail?
Oh, that I'll tell you what I think it entails on a very short webinar. We could do 10 webinars on this.
Yeah, right? I'm excited.
An investment-worthy project is one, and I'll put it this way: imagine yourself as a private equity investor. This is maybe the easiest way to do it. They expect a small business owner to walk in and talk about fixing roofs or changing HVAC systems or fixing cars. And they think that your accounting is not going to be very good. And they think that you're not going to be terrific at stable, profitable sales at the front desk, and they think that there's going to be problems with quality in the back shop, and it's a dirty business, and there may be real estate problems with the oil and the gas that y'all dropped on the ground for 50 years, blah blah blah. Right? They think here. We heard this when we did the straightaway project. We can't wait to get our hands on this project so we can show these guys how to do business. That's the answer to the opposite end of the question from Bill, right? That's what they expect. And so they come in to give you whatever is minimally necessary to take it, own at least 51% or more, and then build it in the way that they want to build it for their own financial goals. An investment worthy project is for us to create something that makes sense in our industry, that is profitable and sustainable long term at the top end of the industry. We get our financials together, we get our business plan together, we present them something that they would envy, not ridicule, and then we declare the terms. And so what I'm saying is we do business their way. We do our business there in their terms, right? In their language, if you will. It's not even their terms. It's our terms, our business, our terms, their language. And that's in the big picture what I'm talking about
Our
here, right?
terms, their language.
That's right.
Mm-hmm.
Our business, our terms, their language is a good way maybe to put it. So Bill, I hope that's good. If not, reach out.
I think there's a whole topic on this, on understanding their language.
No, that's right. And presenting it in a way that they can see it, right? I mean, you got to
Yes.
put a real private equity business plan together, and you show them what they'd be interested in, and they're not trying to guess at what the gaps look like. And look, here I'll say this real quick because we are going to run out of time. But it's this issue of when you make an investment, it's two considerations: it's risk and return. And if the risks are big and unknown, then the returns are shaved, right? There's margin that they take out of what they'll pay you for your business if they don't fully know what they're buying from you. So part of investment worthy is that we build it so that it's strong. Then we show them where the risks are and how we've mitigated those risks and how it's a minimized risk for them. And then they'll pay you more money for it because they don't have as much unknown as they would in a typical project that they would buy in our industry that wasn't so well put together. Right? Their returns, they're more confident of their returns because of the way that we handled the risk management component of it. So that's a piece of it too. Right. And it's all just very investment focused. It's the way investors think, risk and return.
Yeah. I think the one thing I feel like that PE firms probably don't, well, maybe they understand it better. You tell me what you think. They don't understand the staffing struggle that we have in this industry and what a barrier that can be.
I don't know who would, because I didn't until I got here. Right. And I came to understand, there's an awful lot of dynamics here that aren't in other industries. And it's very interesting because there's a I want to say an arrogance, not from a narcissistic kind, but just like this can't be that different than other industries. And it's like, yeah, in a lot of ways it is. And part of why I've settled here is I think it's fascinating. This is a very difficult business to do well. And when you all out there have mastered it, you're among the best business people on the planet. And I tell this to your peer group all the time. Nobody ever believes me. Oh, that can't be true of us little old humble car repair guys. It's like, no, it's true. I've worked in the Fortune 100, and I'll put you guys up executive to executive any day with the guys at the top of that business. And that's what the finance guys don't understand, the complexity of what we do. So when they get to it,
they think it's just this simple thing or something.
I know a lot of the guys on this page really well. And there's one of them on here that sat down very confidentially and said, we got into this business and then we learned it the hard way by thinking we knew more than we did. And it was a hell of a lot harder than we thought and cost us a whole lot more than we anticipated. Yep. And we're still reeling from some of the decisions that we made. That's typical of a PE firm investing in a difficult business like ours. And that's, again, back to Bill's question. Part of getting ready is saying, guys, we're going to bring you knowledge and balance and scalability, and we're going to teach you how to run this thing. And in fact, what we like is a deal where you leave us in charge of running the business and you go do the finance part, and then let this thing work in a genuine partnership and not have us be, ripped into your arms and have it ripped out of our control. And you guys go get lost in it, because then we're all going to lose money. Right.
Well, maybe you're hitting on another question here from Charles. He asked, what's the business play for PE? Is it purely profit driven, or is there a hidden market dynamic at play? I mean, you hear about different verticals that some of these other groups are going for.
Perhaps. Oh my gosh, that's I will say this. I could answer that question in 10 different ways and still not have the list complete. There are vertical integrators, there are simple quick flip guys, like if you think about real estate and fixing up a
Mm,
house and moving it to the next guy. There are family office type longer term investors that want to build significant scale before they sell up into a bigger system. And it revolves around this. I think we're going to suspend the slides and just kind of drift into the
oh,
last
that
few
works for
minutes.
me too. This is
But
we're going on a path. I like it.
yeah, but the concept of the scalability part is that if you got one store, you might sell it for 2.75 times EBITDA, or your net, if you will. You might sell it for 3 times, maybe 3.25 if you have a particularly well put together single shop. If you put 10 shops down on the ground, you might get an investor to pay you 4.5, maybe 5 times for it, maybe 5.5. If you've got 50 shops, you might be able to get 10, 11, maybe 12 times EBITDA for it. So if you chart that stuff out, guys, it's an exponential curve. The bigger the
Mm,
number of locations to go with the EBITDA amount, and it's really EBITDA driven, but the bigger the EBITDA amount, the more the multiple that comes back to you. And so
mm.
scale in the investment world really matters. For us, scale is painful because it means having to run a whole bunch of very complicated things now multiplied by the store locations. But from a
Yeah.
financial perspective, they're building scale. So to
Well,
answer the question, as
mm,
long as the money works for them, they tend to be happy, and then the rest of it is nuance. And again, there are exceptions. The straightaway guys that we did business with were outstanding investment partners. They said, "Look, we know how complicated this is because we have some experience in it. We are not going to come in here and tell you how to run your business. We'll bring what we bring, you bring what you bring, and we'll have a genuine partnership." And that's what
mm,
that's what I think the ideal would be, is you
yeah.
find a partner like that. And guys, there are thousands of investment partners out there that you could potentially work with, and going through a process of finding the ones that you are aligned with and that you all think the same way and that you want to do business together. That's a project in and of itself, right? That is part of the elegance of finding how to do this and not get run flat by the steamroller that comes through town.
Yeah, and that's what I fear like always would happen in these scenarios. Is like a lot of times these groups will go and they're looking for that guy, as you indicated, that's just kind of looking for that parachute, if anything. And that joining or accepting an offer from a PE group is something that is saving your business, as opposed to giving them something that's, worth
Well, I mean,
investing
that's
in.
and that depends. Back again, I have lots of conversations with owners, and the ones that I tend to want to work with as owners to do these projects well, I say, what do you want out of your exit? And if it's all about the money,
Yeah.
then they're less interesting to me, not because I'm judging them, but because I can
Oh,
sell a legacy company to a private equity firm, guys, better than I can sell a financial transaction to a private equity firm. Does that make sense? If I
mm,
sell them a good financial transaction that has a legacy company attached to it, everybody does better, the investment firm too. Does that
mm.
make sense?
I
So
think
I
so.
I want owners that say, look, it's more than the money. I built a community presence. I have taken care of my customers with safety. I have been a significant business in my community that's done the right thing for 40 years. And
Mm,
I want that legacy to continue. And I want the people that have worked with me, that I care about, that I've invested in, that have been loyal to me, I want them taken care of in the new world that we're transferring into these consolidators. So
yes.
those are the people, that's a company that an investment firm is more interested in investing in than somebody who just wants to make a quick financial transaction, because
Hmm.
they're smart. The investment companies are smart. They know what they can leverage and sell in the next iteration of leverage, right? So this is again, I'll help somebody who has a financial perspective, but I can't take them as far as somebody who has a legacy perspective, if that makes sense.
Interesting.
So, yep,
Interesting. All
right.
right. Well, that's actually really, I find it encouraging. A lot of what we
Mm,
were building in the family business, and granted, my brother and I left that realm and got into different parts of the industry, but
mm,
what we felt like we were building was a legacy.
yep.
And building that community sense and all that, loving the name recognition, loving the people that we were serving. And what
Yep.
you're saying, it sounds like that actually is very attractive
Yeah, and I'll go back to the question. I don't remember the name of the person. I apologize, but somebody said, "What do the PE firms focus on?" There are
Yeah,
PE firms who just focus on the financial transaction,
of course.
and so for the person, the guy, the gal, the owners that want out for the money, there are people who will just make you a nice financial deal, and you'll walk away with scale better off in consolidation than you will if you did it if you sold it to your key employee, if you will. At the end
Yeah.
of the day, though, if you do care about the people that work for you, they don't have the heart to do that. And I'm not saying that they don't care about humans. That look, we all live in the world
Mhm.
we believe is important. If it's money that I'm here for, I'm going to go find a way to make money. And it's like, so who has to be set aside to make that? Well, that becomes an incidental question to me. If I'm a legacy driven person who makes money following doing the legacy right, then the legacy is number one. And I got to tell you, in my experience, when you're a high performance company, these are the bullet points we would have gotten to if we had 2 hours to do this instead of one.
Yeah.
If you're a high performance company and you've got a mastery driven culture and you're really making a difference in your community, then you're in a position to be able to say to your future buyer, I'm going to bring you a greater value for your future investment. And again, those investors that think that way will want a legacy based company because there are financial tracks in investment and there are legacy tracks that yield financials. I don't know if that makes sense. The legacy companies will tend statistically to make more money than the companies that are chasing money without having a legacy concept.
Interesting. That makes perfect sense to
And so
me.
a
I
really
want that to be
savvy,
the reality.
well, it actually, the PE firms that get it will look for
Yeah.
legacy conversations in the business plan, knowing that the money will come in abundance when they do it right.
That's
The other
sick.
guys,
Yes. Thank
the other
you.
guys don't know
Thank
any
you.
more than chasing the money. And then they chase the money.
Yes.
They buy
Yeah,
something
and
from
that's worked.
somebody who was
I,
chasing the money. And it's
I have
fine.
one
It's
more
fine.
question here too, as we're running
Yeah.
out of time. I want to see what you
Yeah, I
think on
know,
this. I
right?
love this question because geography, I love geography. I like talking about, I'm from Michigan. I point to the map. This is stuff. Is geographic location important as a component for PEs to look at if they're that 100 plus type group? This question again is from
Yeah.
Charles.
Yeah, no, they are. Geography is important, and if you think early in the days of Verizon and AT&T cellular and all that, remember the maps of the US they used to put out, and they'd show you
Yes.
proudly that we're in,
Yeah.
50 cities, and there's all this, other color on the gray part of the map that was most of the geography in the US that didn't have coverage yet, right? And then over the years, we watched the color spread so that now there's not much space left that isn't covered. The same thing's going to happen in our industry in terms of roll up. So, yes, geography matters more now than it will later, but it matters a lot now. If you're in Chicago, or if you're in Los Angeles, or if you're in Dallas, or some of the bigger MSAs, metropolitan statistical areas, those guys want to do business in those big cities right now.
Mm.
Why? Because at their next iteration, when they sell it to the next PE firm, they can get more money if they're in a concentrated geographic urban and suburban area than if they're spread across a giant rural space. At the
Rural
end of
space.
the
Understood.
day, each of these networks is going to be doing what the big mobile phone companies have been doing, trying to get the broadest networks they can to sell to the next guy upstream. And guys, the end of the game is, and this
Mm.
is 60 industry verticals into it. So don't think I'm excited about this, but I'll tell you where I expect us to end up.
Yeah.
BlackRock, State Street, and Vanguard owning 80 to 90% of our industry and having, a dozen players that they own that compete with each other. That really is them dominating an industry the way they do now, like they do 50, 60 other industry verticals. And at that point, the rural question is not going to matter because you're going to be in somebody's network at some point, somewhere along the way, whether it's you or two iterations of owner out from you. That's where we're going to end up in 20, 25 years. Again, unless there's a massive shift away from automobiles at all, right?
Yeah.
Some,
We have to, yes,
some kind
there's
of
so many
flying
technologies.
gravity. Well, some kind of
Uh,
gravity technology where we don't have
Gosh.
wheels and axles and bearings. And I mean, that's possible, right? In
Yeah.
5 years,
Yeah.
or we have some kind of a global economic or political disruption that sets everything on its heels, and then that'll be a different sort of
The
a
horse
different.
people were right.
Well, And this is what, and I'll say this in closing, and then I'll let you wrap up here. But when I asked the PE guys going into all the last couple of years and elections and all that, I said, "How do you guys plan for all the futures that are uncertain?" They said, "Oh, we invest going into the next project like history would show would be successful. Because if we try to outguess what it's going to look
Mm,
like 5, 10, 15 years from now, we'll get lost in that and we'll never do a project." So we have to sort of move with what we have today. We have to
yep.
think about what we know. We
Yeah.
have to, and Craig, in a way, I want to say this: we have to plan for non-catastrophic giant futures, right? We have to plan for things to develop along a logical path in a
Yep.
systemic kind of a way, and that's what we
Beautiful.
invest in. And I'd
Well
say that
said.
for us too. That's how we have to think about it too, right?
That's
Don't
really well said.
don't be thinking about World War III. Be thinking about what consolidation looks like 7 years from now.
Yeah,
That's
and the best advice I was ever given by someone in my local area who was a businessman is build for success. And
yes,
his basic point on
absolutely,
that was everything that you're doing, like
absolutely,
build it to be successful,
absolutely,
and that all the good comes later on. And hey, planning for
absolutely.
the future, I do want to segue to this point.
Mhm.
I am excited for this. This conversation, I would love to have this over a table and some food and
Sure.
talk more on this stuff with you, Michael. Uh, Going and some networking at this event in February. That's February 6th through 9th. Autoflow is sponsoring. We will be there. Autoflow clients, and really, I'll say this, like if you're on this webinar, save 15%. Check it out. We are theinstitute.com/summit. I would really, really encourage you guys come out here. You'll get chances to speak with Michael and hear from other really great keynote speakers if you check out this event. I am a speaking fan. I love good speaking. I'm really thankful, Michael, that you could come and bring this topic to our audience and
Happy to be here.
eloquently, I will add, deliver some really interesting insights that we do not get a lot of perspective on here. So this is really unique content for
Love
our
it.
audience, and I think it's going to be a really popular one here. We'll be excited to get this recording out for you folks
Fantastic.
as well, because there's going to be a lot of things you're going to want to hear again, I'm sure. Uh, this is going to be great. Michael, I think you were, yes, it was. We talked about this earlier. It was 2023, the first summit, and that's where I saw some stuff related to these topics there. And it was the same sort of thing. It's like, you know what? We need a part two. We need more time. And I think we're
Well,
going to really
we're gonna
continue.
go through some of this and a lot more at the summit here in February too. So if this is interesting, come join us. It'll be a blast. So
Ah,
we'll see you there, Craig. You and
I
I'll sit,
can't wait.
keep unpacking all this stuff. It'll be fun. So
Yes, it will. And in a nice spot. February is pretty great that time of year.
yes, it is.
So very good. No, thanks again, Michael. And this is how you reach out to us here. We have Michael's email right up here. That's
Oh, let me
MA
get it.
Smith
Yeah,
at wearetheinstitute.com. And of course, my email. You guys know my email. But now is the last chance you can get for any questions here. And Michael, I'm so glad we had those questions. They were really good questions
great
on
questions.
this stuff.
Absolutely.
I have one question in terms of what you would want to move this conversation towards next, your next bucket, if you will. What would that conversation look like?
I think one thing I want to say to everybody is start thinking about your exit strategy now. And that's kind of a funny thing to say, right? There's one of those lines that we talked about that people don't do this thinking until the very end, and then they scramble out the front door. And a year later, they're like, "God dang it, I screwed this up because they didn't think about it." We have a whole discussion that we have here, and take it for a sales pitch, if you will. It's not that, but we do it. We start
Yeah.
with exit strategy conversations right now. And the question is, well, how can I possibly do it now? It's like, it doesn't matter. You do the best you can now. But if you're not heading in a particular direction, if you don't have a vision for it, and you're rambling along, right, you're going to end up where you end up without having it really thought through. Do the best you can to think it through now. And then we move on day by day in real life, modifying it as we go. You talk about a business that hasn't got value built into it. We build value in it as we go together. You know, the business owner is doing it. We're just there to help as we can, whatever. But the business builds value in it step by step all the way to the end. So you don't get to the end and say, "Oh, gee, I wish I'd built value in it along the way." It's a
Yeah.
progressive, active, aggressive approach to saying, and I'll say this as a way of closing. I say to my clients that I love to work with, guys, at some point, you're going to look at me and say, say, oh, I've just decided I'm a private equity investor who happens to fix cars, not a car guy hoping to get an exit at some point. That's what I want you all to think about. Be a
Very nice.
private equity investor in your own company and then fix cars like it's going out of style, but don't
Yeah.
set the private equity investor thing aside. Do it now. So that's my big close. How about that? So
I love it. And that our terms, their language concept, I hear that throughout. And it sounds like what you do is you equip
absolutely.
people with the language. And
That's what I'm
that's
here for.
great.
Yep. Yeah.
Awesome. Michael, thank you so much. Everyone, thank you. I love seeing your comments here. We will definitely get this recording out within a few days. And I can't wait to get it out to you because I'm probably going to have to watch this one too a few times myself.
All right,
Thanks,
everybody. Take
Michael.
care. Yeah, be well.
Yep, we'll
Happy
see you
holidays,
soon.
everybody.
Happy
Okay.
holidays, sir. Thanks again.
Take
Bye,
care.
everyone.